Greetings to you Shatamu nationals, greetings to our sentient being, and greetings to every indigenous brothers and sisters worldwide who's fighting the fight and not giving up. Straight to the point, I'm gonna tackle the situation with buffer and the international war crime, human rights violation, and the genocide that committed against buffer. Usually in situation like this, when you stand up for your rights, in this de facto corporation that refers to itself as St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that is occupying our indigenous landmass, Uromi, and our lands. Usually, when you stand up for your rights, like what they did to me, because buffer maybe not as much familiar and knows the laws in the extent that I know. When I backed them up against the wall and they had no choice, they realized that they back against the wall. What they did was try to silence me, kidnap me, and use psychiatric institution in the level of buffer. Buffer made a critical error in some step of the case and give them a leeway. So they figure, well, it's more of a covert attempt. And then they let it slide instead of throwing him into the psychiatric institution because he entered into a plea. Now, a plea is a contract, whether you know it or not. Buffer did not enter a plea willingly or knowingly. Buffer entered a plea under threat, coercion, and duress. Now, that is not lawful, so that still doesn't stand. Any contract that doesn't have a disclosure does not stand. So that plea doesn't stand. Now, buffer have documents that supersede the state. Second of all, buffer documents is also under an authority that supersedes them, which is the postmaster, which is the highest authority. Because for them to run the de facto corporation, they need a UPU license for them to run a postal service. That's where they get the Kingston Post Office. That is the real bank. And that is the real court. Now, buffer did a step that is internationally, and buffer has to report this to the UPU. That the magistrate, which is an administrative clerk, and an administrative clerk from the canon law, they know this. This law applies to them. This is what they have to work with. Whenever somebody speak on behalf of themselves in a knowledgeable way, that they know what is going on, is you, the administrative clerk, supposed to back down and recuse yourself from the case, dismiss the case. But instead of they do this, they're so greedy for power and control. They love the fact that they're enslaving the citizens and they don't want to give up and they want to enslave the indigenous people as well and try to tax the indigenous people in their own land. So they have to use threat, coercion, and duress. If it mean seal up your lips, if it mean kidnap you, if it mean use a psychiatric institution to silence you from fighting for your rights, if it mean they have to fight you, do all form of evil just to try stop you from exposing the system so that they could try to exploit the citizens and have them submit and don't stand up and fight the fight we're fighting. So they're doing everything in their power. Everything in their power. Stopping you from speaking, denying you due process of the law. They didn't provide proof of claim. Because them is the one who bringing the charges against you. They have to provide proof of claim. They never provide an international admiralty contract. Because they failed to acknowledge that it's the Admiralty Code because they was told not to tell you it's an Admiralty Code. And in Admiralty Code, they have to provide a contract. They're lying to you and telling you common law, but how a de facto corporation can have a common law code? Sense out of nonsense. De facto, you can't have a common law code. You don't have common law. You're de facto. The word de facto means you don't have no power. But what you're doing is exercising power without holding the authority to do so. And the reason why you have been doing it and getting away with it is because you have the manpower and the resources. and then the international community has not have the case against it to come in against you to charge you for genocide, war crimes, and treason, so that you will go to jail. The administrative clerks, the police, the prosecutor, all of them are supposed to be locked up and thrown in jail for these type of crimes. Because it's an international war crime. You don't give a man a chance of due process of the law. That itself is an international human rights violation. Due process of the law, which means the man have his fair share of hearing. He has to be able to speak and present his facts. Buffer present his facts. They cannot debunk Buffer facts. Now they couldn't win Buffer. What they do is silence Buffer. Stop Buffer from speaking. Ignore Buffer international documents that beat them in every way. Act like they garbage document they write alone stands. So because they write something on paper, it gives them authority to rob and extort you. You see how criminals operate? That de facto corporation that call itself government, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is de facto. The word de facto means they have no authority. Yet, they enforce authority without holding the lawful power to do so. The word due process of law means you have a right to a fair hearing. You have a right to present your facts. And if your facts cannot be debunked, truth is sovereign. Remember that, truth is sovereign. And once they cannot debunk your document, the last man standing is victorious. Buffer won the system. Even though they put fake information and claim they find Buffer, Buffer never had a chance because Buffer is up against a giant. A de facto corporation with a military incision and the systematic approach. That giant is against one man. The one man ain't stand a chance when they have the news, they have the media, they have everything. So what they did is not only silence Buffer from speaking, they deny Buffer his rights of due process of law, deny Buffer documents of any standing, even though Buffer won them. They had lost in the beginning. They never had no standing because they acquiesce. Buffer sending everything to them, they never debunk it. That's acquiesce. Under international maritime law, whenever you send out a document and it's never been debunked, it stands as law. Buffer has all the power on his side. Buffer won the system. But what they decide to do, because of greed and power, they decide to commit a war crime and a genocide by silencing Buffer, denying Buffer due process of the law, and claiming the fining Buffer without having proof that they have the power on their side. They have no proof. They didn't have no win. You can't find somebody without due process of law, without the evidence. They can't provide an international maritime law contract. The claim is a common law court. They cannot provide a sworn affidavit and a witness to the stand. They cannot debunk anything Buffer bring to them. All they're doing is denying Buffer due process of law, which is a war crime, it's genocide, it's treason, it's tyranny, tyrannical government. That's what it is. And this is being done in a fact that they don't want the masses to be awakened to this knowledge that we have so that the system will be closed out easy. So they're doing everything in the power if it means they have to silence you and just claim you're fine without any facts or any evidence or any due process of law. This is what they're doing. Committing genocide. No case in any court can pronounce you guilty or fine you without having due process of law. Buffer never had due process of the law. They already acquiesced by not debunking Buffer documents in the beginning when Buffer certify and register mail these things to them. And the second of all, when you use the postmaster disqualifying what they bring to you, Buffer has the standing. Buffer needs to report to the UPU. Report to the office in America that is head. If they don't give satisfaction, then you go to the direct UPU in Switzerland. And you need to report on the magistrate and the exact document he used. You need to send it to them. And you need to look to the UPU treaty to see the code that they violate. I have it, my brother. Ask me for it, I'll give it to you. And we're gonna bring the fucking pressure on these criminals. They just violate an international treaty with the UPU by dishonoring the postmaster authority, which supersedes them. They're de facto. They're not a de jure government. So they don't have no jurisdiction in the first place. Everything they're doing is crime, criminal attempt. You can't come on indigenous soil and tell indigenous people what to do. You can't try to tax somebody in their own land. You can't come in my house, kidnap me, and do me things against my will and tell me I have to take that because no system in the here for hold me accountable. Yeah? And telling me I'm not above the law, but you are. So you can get away with anything you're doing and you can write all kind of fraud on paper and claim it's law and we must obey it. But you is not to be held accountable for crime, invading indigenous land, exploiting indigenous people, robbing indigenous people, trying to tax indigenous people in their own land. That's a fucking crime. Nobody can come into none of these ministers' house. They'll shoot you on sight. Uninvited. You can't steal and rob from them. You'll be thrown in jail. But they could steal and rob, come into your land uninvited and exploit you and tell you you have to pay tax in your own fucking land. This is a war crime. It's treason. It's genocide. Even though they claim they need a ratified document. Hey, how criminal-minded these people are. They need a ratified document for them not to rob you in your own land. So they need a document ratified with the international community for them not to rob you in your own land. This is the absurdity of these agents that work for this de facto corporation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The absurdity of these criminals. They need a ratified document. Now let me go back to 2009. The OS Charter. The OS Charter was ratified by Luan, Galen, Goldcrest. So is another set of crime they're committing again because it was ratified into Parliament. Once a minister signed a document on behalf of the corporation, that is called ratification. They like to lie to people and tell people it wasn't ratified. But the word ratified means a minister that is in office at the time, running for the particular department, sign a document, it becomes law. That's what ratification means. So when Luan, Galen, Goldcrest signed that document, it become ratified there and then. This is the charges also you have to hold against these criminals. Because you also have a ratified OS Charter and the rights of indigenous people that they refuse to obey and they lie in the public face and tell them it's not ratified. But ratification is a minister sign it into Parliament. And that's what Luan, Galen, Goldcrest did. Sign it in 2009. So guess what? Rishan, Ricky Barnett, Bertram Pompey, and all these magistrates is supposed to be locked up for treason and genocide against the indigenous people for disobeying all laws. You can't come into people's land and overrule them in their own land. You can't tell people what to do in their own land. You can't tax people in their own land. That's treason. My people, love and light. Share the video. Just a straight message.